enjoying the conference so far? Yeah? Awesome, guys. Yeah, it's my first time here. I'm having a really great time. Let's give a big round of applause for Mike, Paul, Rebecca, and the whole industry team. All right, guys, for putting on a great one? Thanks a lot. Thanks. Cool. Well, I'm excited to be here today to share some advice with you on how to achieve product market fit from my book, The Lean Product Playbook. And I want to start out with what is one of the most closely guarded product management secrets, the product manager's motto. And you might be familiar with Spiderman's motto. Does anyone know Spiderman's motto? Yell it out if you know. With great power comes great responsibility. That's right. The product manager's motto is similar, but it's a little different, basically. It's with great responsibility comes no power. So it's funny, but it's a little sad too, right? So anyway, we're responsible for a lot of things as product managers. And one of the things we're responsible for is achieving product market fit. Now, product market fit, anytime you have a new movement like Lean Startup, you get these buzzwords like MVP and product market fit. MVP is probably one of the most hotly debated terms out there, right? People arguing about, that's not an MVP, this is an MVP. Product market fit, people talk about it in a slightly different way. They talk about it almost simplistically, like it's a true or false condition. Like, oh, Box succeeded because they had product market fit. Startup X, sadly, did not succeed because they did not have product market fit. But it's not super helpful if you're actually trying to accomplish it or achieve it. And what I found is, after working on a lot of different products in a lot of different contexts, myself at Intuit, as a startup VP, as my own founder, I start to see that there's a pattern of conditions that need to hold true if you want to achieve product market fit. And my background is engineering, so if there's something I want to accomplish or achieve, then I want to have a solid foundation and framework on how to achieve it. And so that's why I wrote the book, The Lean Product Playbook. And that's why it's a playbook. It's a how-to guide for how to achieve product market fit. And I'm excited. I'm going to give away a few copies for the way if you want to win is just send a tweet with my handle at Dan Olsen. Feel free to put a hashtag on there, Industry17 or product management, and I'll announce the winners later on. But basically, the core framework of the book and product market fit is a product market fit pyramid. And I want to walk you through that. It's a framework that has 5 layers. And the idea is it's a hierarchical model with each layer building on the one beneath it, ideally. And the bottom 2 layers are the market. And at the very bottom of the pyramid, we have the target customer. That's the foundation. Everything comes from that. Whose life are we trying to make better? Whose pain point are we trying to solve? Who are we trying to create value for? It all starts there. And the next layer up is for that customer. It builds on that layer. What are their underserved needs? Right? And we're going to talk about the word underserved more later, but we don't want to address the needs that are already satisfied. We want to meet the ones that aren't satisfied yet. But taken together, those 2 layers are the market. And if you look at a marketing book or an economics textbook, it'll tell you that a market is a group of people that share a set of common needs. So that's the market. Now, the way I like to think about your product is 3 things that you need to get right. And a way to think about this pyramid is it's a way to capture the key hypotheses that you have and that need to hold true. And the 3 product layers are these. It starts with your value proposition, which hopefully builds on those underserved needs. But your value prop is, which needs are we actually going to say that our product is trying to address? And how are we going to do so in a way that's better and different than the other products that are out there? That's what value prop is. The next layer up is feature set. That's what's the functionality that's going to actually deliver those benefits to our customer. And this is where the concept of minimum viable product, or MVP, comes in. Because we don't want to overbuild and head in a certain direction and realize we've gone in the wrong direction or made a bad assumption. We don't want to invest too much before we figure that out. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid, we have the UX layer, right? That's what brings the features to life. That's what your customers actually interact with to take advantage of those benefits. So when you look at it, those top 3 layers, that's all the assumptions and decision and execution you're making on your product. And the bottom 2 layers, that's the market. That's kind of out of your control. You can select which market you want to go after and which needs you want to target. But product market fit is just how well are all those decisions and assumptions you're making at the top layers, how well do they resonate with the market? And once I created this framework, I realized that I could create a process to work through these key hypotheses. And I call that the Lean Product Process. And that's what the book is really about. I'm going to walk you through it. It has 6 steps. I don't have time to go through all 6 today, but I'm going to focus on some of the first few steps and close out with an example for you. But basically, it starts at the bottom, and you get clear on your hypotheses about who is our target customer. Then you move up to step 2. What do we think their underserved needs are? Step 3, great. Given that we understand this customer and their needs, which ones are we going to tackle and how are we going to be better or different, our value proposition, figuring out what that feature set should be for your MVP, and then finally the UX design. And that's the pyramid all over again. There's one last step is once you have a UX, whether it's a prototype or a mock-up or a live product, step 6 is you then take that product and you go and you actually close the loop and you test it with your target customers. And that's how you assess where you are with product market fit. So I'm going to be walking you through those 6 steps today. And the first step is determine your target customer. And I should say that you can use this technique clearly for a new product, it applies. You can also apply it for a new feature. It doesn't have to be at the product level. It can be at the feature level. It can also apply to a V2 product. And it can also apply to a product where you haven't yet used these techniques and you want to improve or optimize it. And if you're working on a new product and you're staring at step 1, determine your target customer, a blank piece of paper, you may feel a little anxious, like, geez, I don't really know who my target customer is. I just want to acknowledge that that's okay. This is the first step. There's the most uncertainty right here. And it's okay to have a tentative hypothesis because steps 1 and 2 are so closely linked that as you learn about 2, you're going to come back to 1 and iterate and revise your target market. But I want to explain why getting clear on your target customer and thinking through their lens is so powerful and essential. Let's talk about a need that a lot of people have. The need for transportation within 100 miles of your house. To get to work, to get to school, to get to the store, whatever it is, right? This is a need that probably everybody in this room has. And what happens a lot in product management is people say something like a need or a customer and they stay at the high level. But it's really important to look at this need through the lens of a particular customer because when we'll see that the details are quite different. Let's take 2 target customers that have this need. On the one hand, a soccer mom. On the other hand, a speed demon, right? They both have this high-level need for transportation. But if we went out and did customer discovery interviews with 20 soccer moms and 20 speed demons, I guarantee we'd get different detailed answers about what they care about when it comes to transportation. Say, you can imagine we talk to 20 soccer moms. We might hear things like, well, what's important to you? Well, I'm carrying my children and their friends and all their sports gear. The car's got to be big enough to actually hold all that stuff. I'm driving my children around. They're the most important thing to me, so it's got to be really safe when I'm driving them around. And I'm doing a lot of driving, so fuel efficiency is on my mind. Right? Those might be what we hear. In contrast, if we talk to a bunch of speed demons, they wouldn't bring any of that up. They might bring things up like, well, it's important that the car go fast. It's important that the car look cool, and most importantly, that I look cool while I'm driving down the street in the car, right? And as a result, you end up with very different products. They're both cars, but they've both been optimized for that particular target market. And I like to bring up the car industry because think of all the different shapes and sizes of cars that are out there on the road. They've done a really good job of micro-analyzing their market and achieving product market fit for all these micro segments. So that's the first step. The second step is identifying underserved customer needs. And there's a framework that I've been talking about for a long time that's really helpful here to get clear on customer needs, and it's problem space versus solution space. How many people have heard of problem space before? All right, we got more hands. I love it because I've been talking about this for a while, and I want to define it and tell you why it's so important. So problem space is basically a customer problem, a customer need, a customer benefit that your product should address. So if you have a well-written product requirement, a well-written user story like as a blank, I want a blank so I can blank, that's in the problem space. Say I had an idea and I wanted to create a way for people, make it easy for people to share photos with their friends. That statement, a way to make it easy for people to share photos with their friends, lives in the problem space. In contrast, solution space is a specific implementation to address that need or requirement. If the next thing I said is, and yeah, last weekend I coded this iOS app that actually lets you share things with your friends, that app would be in the solution space. Or if one of my designer friends came up with some awesome mock-ups for what that app should look like, those designs would be in the solution space. So that's the difference. The general idea of what you're trying to accomplish for the user and create value for them is in the problem space. The actual execution on design or solution is in the solution space. And what happens with a lot of product teams and companies is people go barreling right into solution space and start building or designing before they really understand the problem that they're trying to solve. And that's obviously a risky proposition. The example I like to use to illustrate this is when NASA was sending astronauts into space, they knew that the ballpoint pens that we use here on Earth that rely on gravity wouldn't work because there's no gravity up there. Now, it wasn't NASA, but one of their contractors, Fisher, the head of the company said, you know what, I think I can invent a pen that writes in space. And he spent $1 million in R&D and a lot of time and effort and invented a space pen. I have one here. They're pretty cool. I haven't verified myself that this works in space. If any of you work at NASA and want to send me up there, I would be happy to go. but it basically works. Faced with the same challenge, the Russians gave their cosmonauts pencils. And you can actually get a Russian space pen. It's a red pencil in a box poking fun at the space pen, basically. So why do I tell this story? Well, first and foremost, obviously, if both of these solutions are equally good solutions to the problem, the one that didn't take $1 million and all that time and effort is higher ROI and is a better solution. The second reason I tell the story is, even when you're trying to be focused on the problem space, it can be easy for solution space ideas to creep in and pollute your product requirements. When they said, hey, I think I can invent a pen that writes in space, they had a little solution pollution in their problem space. What was it? Pen. That's right, pen. A pen is a solution. It would have been better if they just said a way to write in space, just been a little bit more vague. And then even better than that, if you use the 5 whys technique from the Toyota production system and say, well, why do astronauts need to write in space anyway? Well, we might come up with something, well, they need to take notes and refer to them later. That's an even better way to articulate the requirement. Maybe then we come up with some crazy Siri talking thing where they record it or something and it plays it back, like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that kind of thing, right? So by getting really clear about the problem, it also opens up solutions that are out there. So those are some of the main reasons that I do that. And the way that works out on a feature team is, oh, we need a drop-down. We need a wizard. We need a configurator, right? Those are all solutions. What you should be asking is, why do we need a drop-down? Oh, well, we need a way for the customer to pick their shipping address. OK, great. Maybe that's the best way to do it. Maybe that's not, right? Couple things real quick. If you Google this, you'll end up on an urban myth page. The quick key point is that NASA spent the money. NASA didn't spend the money. It was Fisher. And secondly, it turns out that the space pens are made out of wood, which burns in space. So at the end of the day, everyone uses a space pen. But I like to share that example to bring those lessons home. Let's talk about more of a software example. So again, we've got problem space on the left and solution space on the right. And the idea is you can map between them, and you should map between them. I used to work at Intuit, as Mike said, on Quicken. One of our other big products is TurboTax. Does anyone here use TurboTax? Yeah, a lot of people. Great. It's a software product, so it's in the solution space. It competes with another product in the solution space, TaxCut. And what you want to do is basically map back and forth. For those of you who use TurboTax, I know, try to yell out, why do you use it? What does it do for you? Simple? It works, OK, yep. Louder. Files taxes, right. Yeah, when I run this, I just ran a workshop yesterday. You get all kinds of different answers. Hey, it saves me money, it saves me time, makes it easy, I'm not good at taxes. That's the thing about the problem space, it's messy. Customers give you all this disparate input, and you as a PM have to sort through it, right? So that's why sometimes like, it's just easier, let's just code and build a product, right? But our jobs as PMs is to really define that problem space. At a high level, if I had to pick a single umbrella benefit, it would be something like it helps me prepare my taxes, or helps me do my taxes, right? The other person that really helped me appreciate the importance of problem space versus solution space is Intuit's founder, Scott Cook. And what he liked to do, if he had a group of product managers that he was giving a talk to, at the end, he would ask them, hey, who's TurboTax's biggest competitor? And we would all eager beaver raise our hand, and he'd pick on you. And you'd say, it's TaxCut. He's like, no, you're wrong. It's pen and paper. Because more Americans would do the taxes with pen and paper. So that's the other thing is it helps you really understand what are the true alternatives and substitutes for the needs that you're trying to provide. And it turns out that the customer needs, those bottom 2 layers in the market, they change a lot less frequently than the solutions. Solutions come and go, new technologies come and go, but the need to do taxes has been there before computers were there. And this is the fun part as a product team. What you want to do is basically focus on the problem space and say, great, we're trying to help people, make it easier for people to prepare their taxes. What are all the different things that we can do to help people with their taxes? I'm not saying we're going to do it, but we're going to brainstorm them all. And you might come up with things like, hey, I can check my taxes. Computers are really good at math. They can make sure you don't make a mistake. They can help you file your taxes. Instead of having to print it out and go to the post office, you can just push a button and file online. It can help you maximize your deductions. They could ask you some questions and say, hey, did you do this? Did you do that? Did you know you could write that off? And it maybe could help you reduce your audit risk by analyzing your return and saying, hey, this looks a little risky. You might want to reconsider that, right? And your goal is to brainstorm and define all those different problem statements. And if you notice, they're all written in a certain way. They all start with an action verb, because it's actually doing something and creating value for the customer, right? Check, file, maximize, reduce. The other thing is, whose perspective is it written from? It's written from the customer's perspective, not the product's perspective, not the company's perspective, right? My taxes, my deductions, my audit risk, right? And what you want to do is peel the onion, right? I want to show an onion so you can visualize it. You've got to peel it more and more detailed. And when you do that, you'll end up with a lot of different problem statements. And it is messy, but you actually will see some structure. You might find some related benefits. Let's take these 3 benefits: prepare my taxes, reduce my audit risk, and check my return. If I do discovery interviews with people and I do the 5 whys and say, why is that valuable to you? Why is that important? I'm going to get those people to kind of go up to a bigger picture of benefits. It's called the benefits ladder, to figure out what it's all about. I might hear something like, well, before TurboTax, I'm just not really good at math, and I don't know the tax laws. And I was like scared when I had to fill out those forms because I was sure I was doing it wrong and IRS was going to come after me. But with TurboTax now, it just holds in my hand, asks me question by question. Next thing you know, I'm all done. And that might be an overall benefit of empowerment or confidence, that TurboTax makes people feel more confident in doing their taxes. So that's the confidence benefit ladder. There could be a completely different ladder related to save time, saving them time preparing their taxes, save time filing their taxes. You can imagine taking a stopwatch the old way and a stopwatch the new way and quantifying that time savings. But that is a distinct benefit ladder from empowerment or confidence. And then finally, there's a third ladder of save money, right? There are a lot of different ways that TurboTax can save you money, including maximize my tax deductions. And if you take a step back and look at this and maybe imagine rotating it 90 degrees, you've got this kind of hierarchical definition of the problem space. That's what I mean by a problem space definition. And you'll notice this whole time I've been talking about TurboTax, I haven't mentioned a single feature. I've been talking in the problem space the whole time, right? It turns out that TurboTax has a solution, a feature decked against each one of these. It has a clear one-for-one mapping. And one of the side benefits when you have that clear one-for-one mapping and a well-named feature is just by reading the name of the feature, you can pretty much figure out as a user how it's going to create value for you. So I encourage you to try to create those problem space definitions. If you take my advice and you brainstorm all these different benefits that you could do, the next question that comes up is, great, well, which one should we actually focus on? Which ones are the highest priority? And when I was wrestling with this at Intuit, I created a framework to prioritize customer needs called importance versus satisfaction that I want to share with you guys. So the importance is on the vertical axis. It's like, how important is that user need? If it's saving time or saving money or confidence in taxes, if I ask you, you're going to have different answers for how important those are. If I ask you, you're going to have different answers, right? And you can think about this 2 ways. One is you can imagine a formal survey where we ask people, please rate this on a scale of 1 to 10 or on a 7-point scale, and we survey thousands of people and get a detailed answer, and we plot the number. That's great if you can do it, but you can also just use this as a thinking tool on your team. Imagine low, medium, high. And as a team, just saying, hey, do we think this is a high importance need or a low importance need? On the x-axis, we have the user satisfaction with the current alternatives. This is in the solution space. So with how people are getting that need met today, how satisfied are they? Again, you can think about it as a formal survey question with a numerical answer, or just low, medium, high. And to talk about this, let's just divide it into 4 quadrants. So in the bottom left quadrant, we have a low importance of user need and low satisfaction with what's out there today. In the bottom right quadrant, we have low importance of user need, but high satisfaction with what's out there today. At the end of the day, neither of these are worth going after with your precious time and resources of your team, because it's fundamentally a low importance need. And people don't go after these on purpose. It's just if they don't go out, get out of the building and talk to customers, they don't realize that that's what they're doing. In the upper right quadrant, we have high importance of user need, right? Which is better. But we also have high satisfaction with current alternatives. That's basically a competitive market. It's high importance, but people already have pretty good solutions out there, right? The first thing that I think of when I think of that is like Google internet search. How important is it to find the information you need online? It's pretty important. But it's not like people walk around going, gosh, I can't find a thing on this Google. It's so hard. I can't find it, right? You type in a query or two, you're going to find what you need. And you hear people saying you need to be 10x better than the competition. This is the quadrant where you definitely need to be 10x better. You can't just come out with a Me Too product. In the book, I actually talk about a startup that tried to take on Google. It's an interesting story in there. In the upper left quadrant, we have high importance of user need, so that's good. And we also have low satisfaction with what's out there today. That's where opportunity lies. And these do exist. They may not exist here forever because we live in an innovative, competitive environment, but they do exist. And the example that I'd like to share here is Uber. They've done a lot of things right to get to where they've gone as far as product success and market success. But I think one of the fundamental reasons why is that they fundamentally address an upper left quadrant need. If I asked you, hey, how important is it to get your flight on time? How important is it to get your job interview on time, your date on time, whatever it is? It's pretty important to get there on time, right? So high importance. Oops. And if I said to you, okay, great, taxis are different in different cities, but if I said, hey, think about your last 10 taxi rides. How satisfied are you with that, right? Did the driver show up on time? Did they show up at all? How polite were they? How clean was the car? How safe did you feel? How convenient was it to pay the person? You can imagine some low responses, not for every taxi ride, but for a lot of them, right? That's what that basically upper left quadrant means. And what I like about this framework is it's meant to be a visual framework. So what I'm trying to say, to be explicit, is if there's a product represented by this red dot that addresses a need with that level of importance, and it does so with that level of satisfaction, then the area created by that rectangle, where you plot it in the important satisfaction space, is a measure of how much customer value it creates. And if there's another product that addresses a higher importance need with a higher level of satisfaction, then it creates that much more customer value. And when you see the framework this way, you realize that the area to the right of wherever your product is or where the high watermark is as far as satisfaction goes in the marketplace, that area is how much opportunity there is to create more customer value. And that's why the upper left quadrant offers the biggest opportunity to create customer value. And if you have an existing product, say this is your product, then you can create more customer value by improving the satisfaction with which it meets the need that you're trying to address. Now, I realize this may all sound a little abstract and conceptual. Let me show you some real data, okay? This is real data from a product that I worked on where we actually surveyed thousands of users. This is the survey use case that I mentioned. And asked them for 13 key features of our product, how important and how satisfied they were, right? And here's the data. So now we have a hard 0 to 100 scale and a 0 to 100 scale for importance and satisfaction. And each of these points is one of those 13 features plotted to its corresponding point. And the number next to it is the satisfaction level, so you can just kind of see it more easily. As the PM for this product, the first thing I honed in on right away was this guy. I'm like, this is great. People are telling us this feature is 100% important, and we're getting 98% satisfaction. That's pretty good. My second thought was, I'm not going to spend any of my dev resources on that. Let's go find bigger fish to fry where we can add more value, right? And we have a cluster of things here. We've got one down here. But this one really is the one that's in the highest, the upper left quadrant, basically, right? It's a pretty important feature that's got pretty low satisfaction. And so it was pretty easy to use this framework to identify that as the highest priority feature. And I was excited that after I left Intuit in about 2005, I discovered Tony Olwick's book, What Customers Want. Has anyone here read that? It's a great book. So if the idea of getting quantitative about importance and satisfaction appeals to you, I recommend checking out his book. So we're going to use that to prioritize the features to understand which ones are underserved, right? The ones that are more in the upper left are the most underserved. The next step is to define our value proposition. And what I like to apply here is the Kano model that I learned actually before I even moved to Silicon Valley in a lean manufacturing class. And the way the Kano model works, it also deals with user needs and satisfaction. And what it does is basically on the horizontal axis, it talks about how fully does the product meet that need, from not at all to fully met. And then on the y-axis, it's as a result of how much the product meets the need, how satisfied is the customer, from not satisfied at all to completely satisfied. And if this sounds a little complicated, the cool thing about the Kano model is it boils everything down into one of three categories. Every customer need or feature can be in one of three categories. The first is performance, benefit, or feature. This is pretty straightforward. More is better, less is worse. If we were building microprocessors and our clock speed was 10% more than the other people, that we'd be outperforming them, basically. That would be an example of that. Let me use cars to illustrate this. Say I was shopping for a car, and I saw two cars, and they were pretty similar. They looked similar, their specs were similar, but then I suddenly realized that one of the cars had twice the miles per gallon than the other car. All other things being equal, I would pick that car, because fuel efficiency is a performance benefit for cars, right? The second category is must-haves. Now, having a must-have doesn't actually make anybody happy, but not having a must-have makes them unhappy. Right? That's the essential nature of a must-have. It's not what an executive says is a must-have. The word must-have gets used a lot. The Kano model definition is that customers respond this way whether you have it or not, basically. Sticking with cars, say I went into a showroom and I saw this car that looked amazing, and I read the spec sheet on the window and I said, wow, that sounds like an amazing car. But then I suddenly look inside and I see that it has no seatbelts. I wouldn't buy it because I'd be afraid of getting hurt or dying when I drove it. So seatbelts are a must-have for a car. But if car A has 5 seatbelts and car B has 100 seatbelts, I don't say car B is 20 times better than car A, right? Once I have 1 per passenger, I'm good to go. It flattens out. The third category is delighters. Now, not having a delighter doesn't cause any problems because people don't expect them to be there. But if you have a delighter, it can really create a lot of positive customer value and customer satisfaction. Sticking with cars, not today, but remember back when the first cars came out with GPS navigation. It was a delighter, right? Before that, people were printing out Google Maps or MapQuest or getting lost or asking for directions. And then with GPS, you just put in the address of where you want to go, and it just got you from point A to point B without thinking about it, right? But as we know, over time, more and more cars got GPS navigation. Garmin and TomTom came out with their add-on units, and now we all just use our phones to get around. And that illustrates that this isn't a static picture. This is a dynamic picture, that needs and features are migrating over time, so that yesterday's delighters become today's performance features, become tomorrow's must-haves. And the pace with which that happens just depends on the level of competition and innovation in your space. Why do I tell you about the Kano model? Because what we're going to do is we're going to categorize the needs that we're going after to get clear on our value proposition. And again, our value proposition is, out of all those benefits that the underserved benefits that we analyze, which ones are we actually going to tackle and say our product is the best at, and we're going to actually try to deliver, and how are we going to be better than the competition? And so the way we put the Kano model to use for this is we create a value proposition grid. And I've kept it generic here so you can imagine what it might be for your space. But basically, for your product category, you want to list one per row, what are the must-have benefits, what are the performance benefits, and what are the delighters in my product category. That's step one. Step two is create a column for each of your key competitors and create a column for yourself, for your own product. The next step is you want to actually evaluate and score and rate your competitors, right? Like this. So if we look at this, both of our competitors have the must-have. Competitor A is the best at performance benefit 1. Competitor B is the best at performance benefit 2. They're both so-so at performance benefit 3. These might be things like speed, quality, customer service, whatever it is. And then these guys have a delighter. This is the backdrop upon which we want to determine our value prop. This is the essence of product strategy, right? It's figuring out how are we going to win, how are we going to be better or different. And it's really tempting and easy to say, okay, we're going to be high, 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 high. We're going to be the best at everything. That's not really feasible. It's not really a good idea because, one, you don't have the resources to do that. Secondly, it doesn't create a clear positioning, and it's not really focusing for your team, right? It's a little naive to think that. So what you want to do is pick your battles. And one of my favorite definitions of strategy is it means saying no. It's like, what are we not doing? A lot of times when I advise my clients to create product briefs or write spec documents, it's great that they actually say what's explicitly out of scope. That's very powerful. So what are we saying no to? So given this backdrop, what do we pick for our value prop? We might do something like this. Of course, we're going to have the must-have as well. We're going to pay a little bit of attention to performance benefit 1. We're not going to ignore it completely. We are going to say no to performance benefit 2 and not worry about that. We're going to focus on being the best at performance benefit 3. Maybe we've identified a market segment that really values that benefit. Or maybe we have some technology ideas for how we can deliver higher levels of satisfaction. And then we have our own idea for a delighter. At the end of the day, what matters the most here are what's called your unique differentiators, which are what's the performance benefit that we're going to be the best on, and what's our unique delighter. You don't compete on must-haves. And what you want to do going into the next step, which is MVP, is make sure you're crystal clear on this to make sure your MVP captures those elements so that when you go and test your MVP, you're testing your value proposition. So the next step, as I said, is MVP. In the book, I have a lot of guidance on how to break things down and determine your MVP. I don't have time to get into that today. But what I do want to do is share what I see one of the biggest mistakes teams make with MVP and how it gets misused. Now, this is another pyramid. I guess product managers like pyramids. From Aaron Walters. Now, he's the UX designer behind MailChimp. If any of you use that, I talk about in the book how it's a great product. And his book is called Designing for Emotion. And he has this pyramid as a way to think about a product, like how functional is it? How reliable is it? How usable is it? How delightful is it? And the idea is you color in this pyramid how much that product represents at that point in time. And so obviously with an MVP, there's no way we're going to color in the whole pyramid in one fell swoop with our V1. And people also know that you can't possibly build all the functionality in V1. But what I see people misuse MVP is they do this. They use MVP. They don't build all the functionality because they know they can't, but they use MVP as an excuse to have it be buggy and not worry about reliability. They use MVP as an excuse to not worry about UX design. Oh, it's just an MVP. We can figure that later. How well do you think an MVP like this tests with customers? It doesn't test well, right? Because if they can't figure out how to use it, if there's bugs, they're not going to actually get to use the functionality. So it's true that you only want to bite off a slice, of the pyramid, but you want it to be more like this. For whatever set of functionality you are biting off in your MVP, let's make sure it's reliable enough and usable enough. I'm not trying to have my cake and eat it too. It's not going to be perfect, I know that. But it needs to be reliable and useful enough so that we can actually get a real test of our value prop out there. The next step is to create our MVP prototype. Again, I don't have time to get into this, but you can imagine the normal methods. I'm a big believer in using clickable prototypes to test things before you do any building or coding. In the book, I talk a lot about that. And then the final step is to take our prototype or live product, if we have a live product, and go test it with customers. And as I said, that's the sixth step where you close the loop. We've worked our way through the whole process, the whole pyramid. Now it's time to go test and see where we're at with product market fit. Now, to close out, I want to share an example of an end-to-end application of the Lean product process that I led. It was for a product called marketingreport.com. The CEO of a startup that already had an existing product had an idea for a new product. And it was a really small team. It was me, the CEO, his VP of marketing, and a UI designer. And the goal was to see if there was a business opportunity here or not. And he had a very small dev team, so he himself imposed the constraint that we can do no coding. We have to validate this idea, test it out with no coding. So I was totally excited for that. And the idea was a marketing report. Let me explain. Does anyone here get junk mail? A couple people? A few people, right? The idea is like, imagine you come home, I come home, and I get a coupon for cat litter. Why did I get that coupon for cat litter? Well, it's because somewhere in some marketing database off in the cloud, it thinks Dan Olsen has a cat, right? So his idea was to give people transparency into that so they could fix it if it wasn't right and understand why they're getting it. It was most analogous if you think about the credit industry and credit reports. That's probably the best way to explain it. Not today, but years ago, you'd apply for a loan and a credit card. It'd go off into some black box. It would look you up based on your social security number and come back and say you're approved or denied. Why was that? Well, because they had a list of did you pay your bills on time and things like that. Same idea here. He wanted to provide that transparency that was in the credit market to the marketing industry for customers. I said, OK, sounds great. So our target customer, you guys all raised your hand. It's clearly a big B2C play. Our target customer was most Americans, everyone who gets junk mail. I said, great, let's identify the problem space, and let's talk about some of our MVP feature ideas. And the core idea basically was, as well as we could describe it, was learn why I receive the junk mail I receive, right? Like get transparency and understanding. And then the top feature ideas around that were a marketing report, which was similar to a credit report, a marketing profile, which had all the information about you that they had on in your profile, whether it was accurate or not, and then a marketing score, which was a numerical number that was supposed to be kind of like a credit score. We didn't really define it too much, but higher was better and lower was worse. So that was the core idea. And then one of the executives, in addition to that, wanted to test out these secondary ideas of money-saving offers. Maybe I don't have a cat, but I have a dog. Can I raise my hand and opt in for dog food coupons? I would value that. He thought a hypothesis that maybe people wanted to compare their spending habits and patterns with other people. And then because social networking was hot at the time, social networking. I purely just kind of bolted on. The other exec cared the most about this, but wanted to test out a secondary idea of, hey, what if we just help people just reduce the volume of junk mail that they get? And then we brainstorm a secondary benefit of, hey, well, we can save trees because we're saving paper. So I iterated with the team to get to this point, and I basically said, okay, is everyone's idea on the board here? They said yes. And I looked at this with an eye towards MVP, and I realized this is way too big for one MVP. So what I actually did is I divided it, and we did two MVPs. We did one called the Marketing Shield, where we took the core green stuff and combined it with the yellow, and did one MVP concept for that. And then we took the core green combined with the Savior components and called it the Marketing Saver. So I actually did two sets of prototypes and tested it with two sets of users. Here's an example of going to the next step, UX design. What does our prototype look like? Here's an example of what the main page, marketingreport.com. I'd call this medium fidelity. We didn't obsess about the visual design. It's got a little bit of color, a little bit of design. And then when you clicked in, you got into the main page here. And basically, there was like a little module for each of the key features. And that's how we swapped them out between the concepts. And if you clicked on one of these, it would go to a page dedicated to that feature. So it was a prototype of about 8 or 9 pages that I moderated people through. And what did I learn? Here's that same chart, color-coded now, with green, yellow, and red. And I talked to about 10 to 12 customers in each segment. And basically, there were a lot of questions and confusion, right? The test did not really go well. So green doesn't mean like, yeah, we nailed it. Green meant, well, we feel like we understand what the questions and concerns are. There's something there, and if we address the concerns, we feel like we can actually create some value for people. So first, I was glad that there was some green there, right? Because no guarantee you're going to get green. The second thing is, what was the core idea we were testing? This stuff, is any green there? No green at all, right? It's like, I'm really glad we tested something else. This happens all the time. You help people go out in the marketplace, going after a certain customer and a certain need, and the people say, well, that's actually not important. What I care about is this, right? And Flickr didn't start out as a photo site. Slack didn't start out as a chat application, right? And then just as important is the red. Do you guys know what a marketing score is? I don't know what a marketing score is, but I know it would have taken a lot of time and effort to build. It would have basically, we didn't have the data. We had to license some third-party data API, a lot of engineering time to build the algorithms and basically develop it. So it's just as important to identify those low-value things so you can delete them. So we pivoted, right? And we had to pivot. We started there, and we had to decide we're going to go left to junk mail or right to money-saving offers. We decided to go to junk mail, mainly because it was consistent with the brand. And with money-saving offers, it was hard to see how we're going to be better or different because there were already some people out there. Because we had done zero coding, we had zero qualms about throwing those prototypes out and starting from scratch. And I took my 6 pages of notes and made sure the new prototype addressed every question or concern we heard from customers. So we pivoted to junk mail freeze. Here's the new mock-up now, right? And the cool thing is whenever you get out and talk to customers, you learn so much more about the problem space. We learned a few things. One, I learned that not all junk mail is the same. There's certain types of junk mail that really, really annoy people. It's the financial junk mail, cash advance check, pre-approved credit card offers. I learned that people that live in homes have unlocked mailboxes, and they're afraid someone's going to come in there and grab that and defraud their account or steal their identity. So we put that front and center. Second time I ran the test, I saw people staring in there with a little vein on their temple going. They're getting upset just thinking about it, right? Other things, I didn't even know this, but I asked people, hey, tell me what you do when you get junk mail. Like, well, Dan, let me tell you. I go to my mailbox, and then I go straight to my shredder, and I go shred, 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 shred. 5 minutes. I'm like, how often do you use it? 5 minutes. The mail comes 6 days a week. That's 30 minutes a week. That's 1,500 minutes a year. There was a whole save time benefit that we didn't have in our problem space, right? And little silly things. People said, are you going to save trees? How many are you going to save? So we put in 43 trees to answer their question right there. And it was like night and day difference, right? There were still some questions, little questions about how do I control my mail and things like that, but there were a lot fewer concerns and questions, and the magnitude was a lot less. And I didn't mention this, but both times we asked people, hey, would you pay $10 a month for this service? And the first time, nobody was having any of that. They were not interested at all. And it's always a little iffy to ask people if they would pay, if they don't have to break out their wallet. But we saw a night and day difference. What people said the second time around is, well, I need a 30-day trial. But if your product does what it says here, I would gladly pay you $10 a month. And then the other thing that gave me some evidence was after the test was done, it's like, great, thank you so much for the hour of your time. Here's your check for being with us for an hour. Almost every single person said, so is this live now? Can I go use this? Like, no, we're working on it, we're building it. They're like, can I give you my email? Can you email me when it comes out? So it was like a night and day, again, behavior from the first time. So I was pretty psyched about the results that we got. So to sum up, again, the lean product process, start out by getting clear on who is your target customer, identify what their underserved needs are, figure out what your value proposition is, how are you going to be better or different than the competition, specify your MVP feature set so you don't go too far in a certain direction before you realize it's the right one. Create a prototype so you can get out of the building and test it with customers, basically, and learn and iterate. Thanks a lot. I'm going to head over to the Barnes & Noble table. Happy to answer questions there. I'm going to be signing some books, and then Bob and I are going to be doing Q&A in the talk shop. Thanks.